Motorola has jumped onto the dual camera bandwagon in its mid-range series with the G5s Plus. However, there are various different implementations of dual cameras and not every implementation guarantees better camera quality as we have come to see in certain smartphones of the past. Let's see how the Moto G5s Plus does with this camera setup. At the back is a dual camera setup that comprises of two 13-megapixel cameras with identical f2 aperture. The difference between the two is that one is an RGB sensor while the other is a monochrome sensor. This is the setup that we have seen from Huawei, the brand that sort of pioneered the dual camera setup a while back. Such a setup should bring in more sharpness and detailing as well as better dynamic range even under poor lighting. The G5s Plus takes good photos when it comes to detailing, however unless you use the HDR mode the dynamic range is quite poor. When in HDR mode the dynamic range is good, but you really need to figure out what to meter the exposure on or else you'll get mixed results. The device does a better job at extracting from the shadows than it does saving the highlights. You'd be better off exposing for the mid-tones or somewhere towards the highlights. The colors are good too, but especially in the HDR mode the white balance does seem a bit off if you don't meter it correctly. In low light, the images are surprisingly noisy and aren't really all that impressive in terms of exposure either. HDR mode helps in terms of getting a more balanced image, however the noise increases even further and the culprit for the noise seems to be the over-sharpening. Unlike some phones that come with a 2x optical zoom and a portrait mode, the G5s Plus comes with a depth sensor that makes use of the wide-angle camera itself. You can take pretty good portraits and even self-portraits such as the one here, and the blurring algorithm seems to do well around objects that are well defined. My bald head might have helped it a bit here. However, it does fail to detect some complex shapes and the blurring does go wrong at times, especially with certain objects. The main issue, however, with the depth sensing mode is that the algorithm also seems to drastically reduce the sharpness of objects or subjects even in focus. That shouldn't be the case since there isn't any digital zoom going on. There's a depth editor app that allows you to selectively color images as well as adjust the level of blur and change the focus after the fact. Lastly, there is a background replacement tool which works but just barely, and the results are mostly comical, so I personally wouldn't use that. The camera app itself is quite simple and gives you different modes such as photo, depth sensing mode, panorama, and a professional mode that allows you to adjust the settings manually. Users can choose to toggle the camera shutter sound as well as the assistive grid for composing photos. The main issue I found with the camera app is the lag. There is a bit of a shutter lag, but it seems like the camera takes ages to save a photo after it's been captured, and if you are one who loves to take photos in quick succession, this would be a problem for you. The G5s Plus can record videos at a maximum resolution of 4K at 30 FPS. While the footage has good detailing, the lack of stabilization sort of ruins it. In fact, stabilization is available only in 1080p mode and that to a 30 FPS. There's a 60 FPS mode which is pretty nice, but again it doesn't have stabilization. In 30 FPS mode as well, the videos do have EIS, but then again it isn't as good as some of the other phones we have seen, including ones from Motorola. The phone also takes quite a long bit to rack focus in video mode. The front-facing camera is an 8-megapixel unit with f2 aperture and an LED flash to assist it in low light. The images are decent in terms of exposure, however fail to impress with the detailing despite having 8 megapixels of resolution to work with. It can capture HDR photos too, but doesn't really improve the dynamic range drastically, and there is a beauty mode as well, but it works only without the HDR mode. The front flash too works only without HDR mode, and the resulting image might not be very impressive as you can see. The Moto G5 Plus is most definitely not a photographer's choice when it comes to the camera setup. On paper, it might sound promising, but the actual implementation is really poor. Aside from the main camera which does well mostly in HDR mode, nothing else really impresses. Hope that Motorola improves the camera performance over time with updates, but there would be a limit to what they would be able to achieve with that too. Thanks for watching this video. See you again in the next one. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to get the latest updates from us. Thanks for watching this video. See you again in the next one.